Hey, everyone for joining. We apologize if we had a panel that ran over. But I would like to start with some introductions and then we'll hand it over to the moderator. So, hello everyone in the audience, hi to the speakers, and welcome back. In this session, we'll take a closer look at how RWE works in practice. We'll start by revisiting some foundational concepts to ensure that we're all aligned, and then we'll talk about the ISPOR group, the Global Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research. Their perspective on shaping conversations on evidence generation, policy impact, and patient-centric decision making, and how each one of us can connect with and get involved in this global movement. I'm very excited to welcome all of our speakers who will share their perspectives on how ISPOR is helping validate and advance fit-for-purpose data in the era of AI. I'll start with some introductions for the speaker first. We have Sandipan Bhattacharjee. He is the Director and Real-World Evidence Leader in Oncology at Bayer, where he leads design and execution of RWE studies that support Bayer's oncology portfolio. Prior to joining Bayer, Sandipan worked as a director of outcomes research methods at Otsuka Pharmaceutical Development and Commercialization, and currently also serves as the chair of the ISPOR Real World Evidence Special Interest Group, advancing global awareness and adoption of RWE. Next up, Clarissa Cooblall, Director of Scientific and Patient Initiatives at ISPOR. She leads programs that bridge science, patient perspectives, and global collaboration in health economics and outcomes research. At ISPOR, Clarissa drives patient engagement and HEOR oversees scientific member groups and supports real-world evidence initiatives that strengthens research, decision-making, and patient-centered approaches worldwide. Next up, Madeline Shipley. She's the Scientific and Health Policy Initiatives Manager at ISPOR, the Professional Society for Health Economics and Outcomes Research, where she leads projects analyzing healthcare systems, evaluating outcomes, and supporting health policy initiatives. She has a background in analyzing public and private systems of care and the evaluation of health outcomes in physical and socio-economic contexts through health policy lens. Doug Foster, our next panelist, he is a partner at Advanced Data Sciences, ADS, an advisory firm specializing in the use of healthcare data for organizational initiatives. He is also the chair-elect of the RWE Special Interest Group at ISPOR. He has 25 years of healthcare experience and specializes in data partnerships for research and AI. He has lectured on these topics at institutions including UCSF, Stanford, and major health systems. Mr. Foster holds an MBA from Stanford and a BA from Yale. Next up, I would like to introduce our moderator for this session, Dr. Purav Gandhi. He's the CEO and founder of Healthark. He's a physician with an MBA and over 15 years of experience in healthcare and life sciences industry, with deep expertise in advising clients across full spectrum of life sciences domains. He co-founded Converge Health at Deloitte, and after starting his career at Deloitte as a strategy consultant. I would now like to commence this session by handing it over to the moderator, Dr. Purav Gandhi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this discussion. As we go into this discussion, I would like to set the context around the conversation we had leading up to this particular panel discussion. Right? ISPOR has been the leading industry body when it comes to thought leadership for health outcomes and economics and outcomes research. I have probably known ISPOR for more than 10 years, attended a few events, and yet when I met the panel, they asked me how much do you know about ISPOR? And I didn't have a lot to say beyond 5 or 6 sentences after tracking ISPOR so closely. And now, in our audience, while RWE is such an important topic, I believe all of us are at different stages in our journey in terms of understanding real-world evidence, in terms of understanding what ISPOR does for this field, what are some of the things happening, how to learn more, how to get involved. But also, RWE is not a very new topic, right? It's been fairly popular and in use for more than 10 years. So sometimes many of us could also feel it's too late to ask. So in this session, as we were planning about this session, we thought that we will start with basics and fundamentals of real world evidence, uh, get to know ISPOR more, and then get to know that as practitioners of this field, as aspirants in this field, how can we get involved better? How can we learn more? How can we help play a role in terms of advancing the science? So with that, we'll do a slightly different format in this panel. We'll use a presentation where we'll let each of the panelists speak about this for some time. And then towards the end, we could have a few questions. So with that, I would like to hand to the panel to kick it off.
Great, thank you, Purav. I'm going to lead off with the slides today. Doug Foster here from ADS. Well, maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit while the slide. Here we are. The slides are coming up. So first of all, thank you to the conference organizers for inviting us to talk a little bit about ISPOR and the role that ISPOR has within the data community in healthcare. And as Purav mentioned, RWD is a concept that is very familiar for those of us who've been working with it for decades, for years. However, for many people, it is still a new concept, or it's a bit of a befuddling concept, given that there's a lot of nuances to it. So what we're going to do today, before we get into a discussion of ISPOR, is we are going to talk about some baseline definitions. What is RWD and what is RWE? We're going to talk not only about what those definitions are, but how the data is used and who the users are, just so that we're all on the same level in terms of thinking about the topic, which will really set the stage in terms of understanding what ISPOR does. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Great, one more, please. So what is RWD and RWE? So if you think about that term, real world data, I think many people would say, wasn't all data real? And what the term real world data is trying to differentiate between is data that's collected through the routine delivery of healthcare versus data that is created under the governance and design controls of a clinical study. So for those that are familiar with clinical studies, they know that they're incredibly important for demonstrating and proving the safety and efficacy of new therapeutics, of medical devices, even of new pathways for care. However, that governed environment when you're running a clinical study isn't necessarily reflection upon how care is delivered normally without such attention to the details of that clinical trial. And so frequently you might find that certain drugs or devices that have data supporting their safety and efficacy for marketing clearances, that once they're put out into the real world, that they perform not exactly the same as they did during a clinical study. And that difference is what the concept of RWD is and RWE is really trying to understand. So again, RWD is the data that's routinely collected in the delivery of care, whereas RWE, the real world evidence, that's going to be the evidence that is derived from the analysis of the RWD. So they work very much hand in glove with each other, and they're designed to provide that insight and to provide that accuracy in terms of how care is normally delivered. So if you go on to the next slide, please. So how can RWD be used? As you imagine, there's lots of RWD if it's the data that's being routinely collected in the delivery of care, and it can be used throughout a continuum of applications across many different organization types. So this slide tries to generalize what those applications are over a continuum of a particular innovation or technology within healthcare. Let's take a drug as an example. There's the discovery phase of really understanding that drug and identifying it and identifying a candidate that will be put into clinical studies to investigate its safety and efficacy. And RWD can be used to really set the stage for understanding what the unmet needs for a particular therapeutic area or patient population may be that will help identify what type of drug to develop or what type of device or new pathway to develop. And then we move into clinical trial operations, and that's really running the clinical study itself. And RWD can be used to gather information about subjects that would be eligible for the trial and enrolling those subjects into the trial as just one example. Regulatory and safety, that's where government agencies such as the FDA, EMEA, that look at the data from the clinical study to determine the safety and efficacy of that therapy. External control arms is a variation of a clinical study design that will include data that was collected outside the design of the study from the real world to compare the study arm versus the real world arm. Value and access, this is a topic that is near and dear to ISPOR's mission in terms of really understanding the value that that therapy may create for the patient, for the provider system, as well as society as a whole. And so health economics and health technology assessment agencies, which are quasi-government agencies or nonprofits, really use that RWD data to answer those questions. Commercial for the manufacturers and research sponsors to help make sure that access to that therapy is as good as possible. And then the patient and provider, such as clinical decision support, the data can be used to help provide the best care possible for the patient from the provider's perspective. So you can see here, RWD is really used in many, many different ways across the continuum, which makes it an incredibly important data type that's out there. So if we go to the next slide, please. When we talk about RWD, that is, one big data type or category that I mentioned. It is there's a high degree of variation when you dig down beneath what that is. I think most people will think of clinical data, the data that is created when we see a doctor, as the RWD. And it is an incredibly important data type within that category. However, the data that we think about when we think about a patient, an individual, it really goes well beyond the data that's created during an examination. It includes data about payment and insurance. It also includes data about the supply chain and the ability for drugs and therapies that make their way to patients, or conversely for patients to access those drugs and therapies. And it includes clinical data from research applications too. And also it includes data about the patient specifically, which is typically called social determinants of health, such as income levels, educational levels, employment status, whether you're housed or unhoused. These are all incredibly important factors in understanding the patient, and they all fall under the umbrella of RWD. Next slide, please. So when you think about that variety, it goes even deeper to create even more variety, which is one of the aspects of this space that I find incredibly interesting, and why I've spent so much time in this industry. But some of those differences relate not only to that data type, but the data types live in different places and they're formatted in different ways. And you can access those data types in different ways. All of those differences, we'll just take one example for clinical data, which is the one that most people understand. It's created in hospitals or care settings, such as hospitals, clinics, surgery centers. It's stored there in electronic health records. But even across different AHRs, you can have different file formats, and you can have different ways of transmitting that data for interoperability purposes. Those differences affect the data in both subtle and not subtle ways, which can introduce bias into the analysis of the data. So you have this massive amount of heterogeneity, which is both a challenge, but also important to pay attention to when you're working with RWD, that you can address, and people have been addressing this for decades successfully, to create the highest quality insights and analysis that you can using that data. Next slide, please. If you want that data, which many people do want that data, then the next question is, well, where do you get the data? And so I've been in healthcare for 25 plus years. And when I started out in healthcare, this was an incredibly difficult question to answer. Where do we get the data? And the reason why it was incredibly difficult to answer was because the data is private, regulated data. It's data about all of us. It is what's called protected health information, or PHI. And almost every country in the world has a set of laws that govern the ability to access and use PHI. And those laws for many, many years kept the data in silos and separated, and for good reason, to protect the privacy and security. However, many societies and many government agencies have recognized over time that there is significant societal value to aggregate that data and look at population-based statistics and analyses to help promote better healthcare within the particular region or country. And so the laws have changed, still protecting privacy and security, but has facilitated the ability to join data from different locations and different data sets. And so today, particularly in the US and to a degree in Europe as well and other countries, that you have many different sources of healthcare data, and for all the different data types that I walked through earlier. You have data vendors, you have data marketplaces, there are registries that are created by specialty societies that collect data and make it available for research, academic institutions, and so on. And then there's a category called synthetic data, which uses real world data, train models to generate synthetic data beyond that. And so there are many, many places where you can get data. And one of the challenges is to determine which place is the best place for you. And the answer is not a single answer. It really is a dependent answer, contingent upon what type of question you're trying to answer. So it is also another very interesting topic of conversation. Next slide, please. So this brings me to my final slide, which is the users. Who uses this data? So we've talked about the types of data, where it lives, what you can use it for. And so the users also are quite a large number of users, as well as a diverse set of users, ranging from industries such as pharmaceutical company and medical device companies, regulators, of course, we've talked quite a bit about their use of the data, societies and academia, payers for coverage decisions to determine how much a particular new technology is worth, as well as health technology assessment agencies, which also try to determine the value of a particular drug or device on society and for patients and for provider systems. So they all have their different use case, also their different desire in terms of the data types, and coordinating all those different groups, because at the end of the day, everyone is in this business to create better patient care. There is an extensive amount of coordination that's needed amongst these groups to work with these data types that are so heterogeneous and require so much work. And ISPOR really sits at the center of that to help with guidelines and standards and to help coordinate all the different activities that are out there, which Clarissa is going to talk a little bit more about in the next section. But that is the context within which ISPOR lives. And hopefully that was a helpful baseline. So I'll pass it off now to Clarissa to take the next session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doug. And just clarifying that everyone can hear me, hopefully. Okay, great. We're off to a good start. So I really think I enjoyed that presentation, Doug, and learned a lot. And you simplify it in a very complex topic for a very diverse audience. And I can see over 1,000 people have joined this session. So thank you all for being here, as well as the organizers for inviting ISPOR to give a little snapshot on what we do at our fun organization. So ISPOR was established 30 years ago. We're very proud to be celebrating 30 years of dedication, I'll say, from our volunteers such as Doug and Sandipan. We can't do it all without those volunteers and visionaries for a goal that is pretty robust. It's to advance the science and practice of HEOR. And if you're not familiar with HEOR, it really is the framework and methodology for generating this type of evidence, as Doug has highlighted, to understand the value, the full value of healthcare interventions. And then you combine that with the economic factors and looking for the best care for our patients and the outcomes. So I'll say that as we've been here for 30 years, we have grown from 240 members in our first year to over 18,000 members worldwide. And that involves individual and chapter members from more than 10 countries, 100 countries worldwide. We are a multi-stakeholder organization, as highlighted on this slide, and as Doug explained very nicely, that we can't do it without all of the stakeholders that are involved in our organizations. In our organization, And we touch different chapters, consortia, students, new professionals, experts in the field. So with that all said, we are the leading source for this type of scientific evidence for the different conferences that we put out across the year. We host 2 different conferences, major conferences in our international annual conference in May, and in November in Europe. And new and exciting for this year, which I'll highlight a little bit later, is our return to the Asia Pacific region. We will be returning to Tokyo in later, 2 weeks actually, later this month. We do highlight peer-reviewed our peer-reviewed journals such as Value in Health. You may be familiar with the journal, but it is Medline indexed, and we do publish a lot of our good practice reports, as well as providing capacity building and education. Collaboration is key across all of these stakeholders, so that is a big area for us with our different roundtables, councils, and really developing those tools and resources that are pertinent for our field. You can find way more information that you're probably looking for on our website, which is www.ispor.org. But to simplify it a bit further, we have developed a new resource that is HURexplained.org that really drives down on each of the stakeholders and how health economics research pertains to each of the areas of the field. Then we go to the next slide. So here's a map of our stakeholders that we primarily reach out to, but as we all know, with the ever-changing healthcare landscape and environment, a lot of what health economics and outcomes research touches on could span the whole globe, as well as all of the different public and private partners, such as life sciences industry, regulators, healthcare providers, patient engagement organizations, researchers and academics who are doing the work behind the scenes, and the payers and policymakers that all of us are touched in the sphere of influence from health economics. So we can go to the next slide. There we go. New this year or earlier last year, we did revamp our vision statement, which is a world where healthcare is accessible, effective, efficient, and affordable for all. We do recognize that is a very bold vision for the organization, but we do still feel very strongly about this. And this is the main aim for the organization. As Doug highlighted, the social determinants of health do not go unseen for health economics outcomes research, as well as real-world evidence. We do recognize that healthcare is complex. We have constrained resources across the globe. In order to meet the demands of our healthcare environment globally, we do need to look at the different types of evidence. We do need to leverage all of what HEOR is capable of doing to inform all of the healthcare decisions that are made. So we do recognize the bold statement, but that's our aspiration, and we're going after it with our new strategic plan 2030. And implementing a very aspiration strategy. So if you have not seen it already, it is on our website, our new strategic plan with a focus on whole health and looking at the different factors that play into a patient's life. So we go to the next slide. Maddie, thank you. Oh, so how to get involved, right? So I've already talked very big and bold about a lot of the strategy that's behind the organization, but how do people like Sandipan and Doug get involved? So right here on this slide is different conferences and events that we have upcoming. Like I said, we are returning to the region, Asia Pacific, focusing primarily on real world evidence. This is an event that's happening September 28 to 30, focusing on very prominent individuals in the field of RWE and HEOR. And I encourage you all to check that out on the website. If you're interested in attending any of these conferences that you see, there are discounted rates for LMICs, patients, students. We have a pretty robust travel grant program for that. So I encourage you to look and see what piques your interest. Our much bigger conference, which hosts about 5,000 individuals, is the ISPOR Europe 2025 conference that is being held in Glasgow. This conference particularly is focusing on patient-centered evidence. So looking at all of the ways that patient-reported outcomes, patient preference, patient capacity building, how does that all integrate into the evidence that drives the healthcare decisions that are important for all? And then we do have a short course program, as well as complimentary webinars that are free and available for all. I encourage you all to check that out because there are a diverse number of topics included there. The next slide. So we are a membership-driven organization. We are a nonprofit. And on this slide, you can see the different benefits that you do receive from your ISPOR membership. Like I said, there are discounted rates for students. I'm sure we have some students in this audience, as well as patient reps and LMICs. So on this slide, you can see that our special interest groups are a member-driven benefit, I'll say, that hosts from anywhere from 200 to 700 members that are in these groups. We have currently 12 different topics that we are covering, anywhere from clinical outcomes assessments, patient-centered research, real-world evidence, which Maddie will dive into a bit further, medical devices, digital health, just to name a few. But like I said, there are 12 different topics that may pique your interests, as well as the Learning Lab that provides all of the recordings that we've had previously. We could go to the next slide. So students, a new network, and the new professionals, these individuals develop a program for the whole year that involves student chapters. So if your university is interested in having a chapter focused on HEOR and or real world evidence, we'd be happy to talk to you. Like I said, there are travel grants, there are awards that are given for different research projects, and discounted fees to attend all of our conferences and get more involved in whether that's a manuscript that you're working with people across the globe that's peer reviewed. There's systematic literature reviews that we're always looking for help with, webinars, journal clubs, fireside chats. So I think that if you're interested in that, you can feel free to contact us. And you could go to the next slide. And a little bit more on our ISPOR member groups. These are scientific member groups, special interest groups and task forces that really set the stage for frameworks and methodologies, good practices in the field of health economics and outcomes research. These task force reports tend to be picked up by groups such as like the FDA, EMA, to be utilized in their guidance documents, as well as other special initiatives that I'll just highlight. Our patient initiative, Women in Health Economics and Outcomes Research initiative, that we try to elevate people in the field and make them have a voice at the table. So other strategic initiatives that we have are the RWE initiative that Maddie will dive deeper into, as well as our regional roundtables that we host for HTA specifically in 5 different regions of the world. We go to the next slide. So specifically for our scientific and health policy groups, that's a team that Maddie and I both sit on. Really, our team is focused on driving the HEOR perspectives, incorporating that into the decision-making. We are very data-driven and rigorous team. So we do really enjoy the informed decisions and evidence-based decisions and incorporating that into different conversations, as well as different manuscripts and research that our team conducts. So that's a little bit about our team, but there is an email on here. If you want to know more about anything that we have put out so far today, please feel free to reach out to us at sigs@ispor.org. So I'll turn it over to you, Maddie.
Thank you, Clarissa, for that overview of ISPOR as an organization. I know when I joined ISPOR a little over 2 years ago that I was just not fully aware of all the amazing offerings that the organization has for its members. So I'm really excited to speak to you all today more about one of our 12 special interest groups that I have the pleasure of managing here at ISPOR, which is our real world evidence special interest group. So as Clarissa already discussed in her slides, that special interest groups advance the use of HEOR in decision making and design valuable resources for our researchers, decision makers, patients, public that make up the ISPOR membership base of almost 18,000 people. Consisting of 100 or more ISPOR members that all share a common interest. Special interest groups and the real world evidence special interest group is just one of 12 unique content areas of interest here at ISPOR. Each have a unique mission and set of goals that are developed by the members. For the real world evidence special interest group, our mission is to increase awareness, understanding, and implementation of real-world evidence with all stakeholders, policymakers, regulators, payers, prescribers, patients, and industry to improve decision-making. So everything that ISPOR as an organization touches, and as Doug introduced as well, all of the different areas that real-world data and real-world evidence play an integral part in. We have 3 unique goals as well, including promoting the dialogue on real-world evidence, developing real-world evidence-specific educational opportunities, and encouraging adherence to existing methodological good practices to improve trust and increase acceptance of economic models, technology, and data models that rely on real-world data and real-world evidence. While the topic of each special interest group is unique, the roles and responsibilities, which you can see in this chart here, remain the same for each leadership team. ISPOR special interest groups consist of 3 SIG chairs, a past chair, and a chair-elect, member engagement chairs, key project co-chairs, an operational lead, and the general SIG membership. Our SIG chairs provide the overall direction and guidance to the special interest group, such as by identifying topics and work streams that the group will pursue and place their focus in. Member engagement chairs also identify topic areas of interest in collaboration with those chairs to develop member activities such as webinars, conference presentations, and educational offerings, as Clarissa described in her presentation as a major member offering from ISPOR. Our operational leads support the full leadership team that is listed out here, as well as myself, who is the staff liaison for the group and helps to bridge the gap between ISPOR as an organization and our members that participate in the special interest group. Currently, ISPOR as an organization, as Clarissa already alluded to, and the special interest group itself is pursuing several real-world evidence-related initiatives. I wanted to start with real-world evidence as a top 10 health economics and outcomes research trend. So from 2024 to 2025, real-world evidence was identified as a top 10 trend by our ISPOR members, and the 2025 to 2026 iteration of this same trend report will go further to evaluate the importance of 17 unique real-world evidence subtopics, such as data quality, fit for purpose, real-world data, methodologies such as digital twins, and promoting transparency, just to name a few. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about our real-world evidence transparency initiative, but that is also a major goal of not only the special interest group, but ISPOR as an organization for promoting transparency and reproducibility of RWE studies as real-world evidence becomes a more acceptable form of evidence when making for clinical decision making. We also evaluate the applications of more advanced methodologies for real-world evidence studies, such as external control arms, and target trial emulation is one to mention for causal inference real-world evidence studies. It's already been mentioned by Doug very early on, but we're also taking a closer look at social determinants of health as a valuable source of real-world data. And Sandipan will talk more about our ongoing key project as the special interest group in just a little bit. And then we are also beginning a deeper look into the strategy of tokenization and using real-world evidence for clinical trials. So to elaborate a little bit more on that real-world evidence transparency initiative and the Society's pursuit to improve standards and practice for the collection of immense sources of real-world data, the RWE Transparency Initiative took shape as a partnership between ISPOR, the International Society for Pharmacoepidemiology, or ISPE, the Duke Margolis Center for Health Policy, and the National Pharmaceutical Council, or NPC, to establish a culture of transparency for study analysis and reporting of hypothesis evaluation real-world evidence studies on treatment effects. A key aspect of credibility is that a real-world evidence study is conducted transparently as we work to improve the acceptability of real-world evidence as a reliable source of evidence, especially when looking at clinical outcomes. As an ongoing effort of this initiative, this produced the Real-World Evidence Registry, which is linked below on the slide here at www.ispor.org/RWE registry. It is a fit-for-purpose platform that allows researchers to register their study design to facilitate the transparency that's necessary to improve trust in study results for clinical outcomes. The registry currently houses 111 unique study protocols, all submitted by global researchers in pursuit of promoting transparency of real-world evidence studies and promoting the acceptability of their results, which are using real-world data and real-world evidence as their primary sources. Lastly, how we can sign up for a special interest group. So it is a unique offering to members of ISPOR as an organization. The QR code that is currently on the screen, you can scan and it will take you to our membership page where you will be directed to click on joining special interest groups and communities of interest. They are open, as it says on the slide, to all ISPOR members, and real-world evidence is just one of those 12 unique topics which you can participate in. So while the membership group consists of just over 600 members currently, and the leadership team is made up of those roles that I presented at the very beginning, there are numerous opportunities for our members to get involved with activities such as with key projects, participating in conference presentations, and attending webinars, which are just some of the real-world evidence activities that our special interest groups undertakes, and that dives even deeper into the numerous topics surrounding real-world evidence and real-world data that Doug started to introduce, and that Sandipan will dive deeper into while discussing the numerous ongoing work streams that we have as a group. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I will hand it over to Sandipan.
Thank you so much, Maddie, and thanks everyone. And good to be back again within like a 30 minutes or so session. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to talk, as Maddie said, to inform you guys about some of the activities that we have been doing as part of this RWE SIG. So for the year 2024-2025, we had several activities, and to be honest, like this SIG has been extremely active in coming up with new projects, new topics, and so on. So one of the initiatives that we do is organize journal clubs. For 2025, I don't think we are going to have a journal club because we have been moving towards a little bit different format. But we used to have a lot of journal clubs when I used to be a member engagement co-chair. So one of the things that we did in 2024 was as a group, like this journal club is specific to only RWE SIG It is very sick specific. So for that, we discussed about the early prediction of Alzheimer's disease and related dementia using real world electronic health records. So they had used some advanced techniques and all, and we had a very robust discussion with the lead author being presenting on this topic to us, and we as a group, and like special interest group, asking questions about the methodologies and so on. So that is one of the activities that we did. The next was, and this is a significant contribution, I believe, to the entire field of RWE, is we provide comment responses. Like, for example, the CMS, or the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they had policy changes to the data access. And some of those data access were perhaps going to be a little bit deterrent to a lot of researchers who want to access this important databases. So ISPOR as a group, and we many of us contributed to that comment response. Then similarly, we did that with the EMA, or European Medicines Agency, reflection paper on the use of real-world data in non-interventional studies. So if you remember my talk, like you were talking about all the different groups coming up with certain policy changes, certain guidance documents where we are able to provide comment responses, and ISPOR has been very active, and sometimes even have partnered up with similar organizations such as ISPI, which is the International Society of Pharmacoepi, to provide comments together, right? And then last but not the least, in comment responses, we had the CMS proposed guidance documents for study protocols that use real world data. So we provided comments on that as well. So quite a bit of active participation. Then in the different conferences that you saw over this presentation, so obviously this upcoming Tokyo RWE specific summit, the RWE summit is going very focused on RWE, but in the major conferences as well, like the North American annual conferences, as well as in the European conferences, we usually have a forum which is sponsored by the RWE SIG. And there we talk about some of the very relevant topics. Like, for example, in 2024, last year, ISPOR Barcelona, the RWE6 sponsored forum discussed on the data analysis and real world interrogation network, or Darwin EU, which is going to be a very significant thing that is happening, the change that is happening in the European setting. And we discussed where we are now, what is in store for the future. So we have representation from the EMA, we had representation from industry, we had representation from people who are going to do some of the data analysis, like academia and all. So bringing in all the different perspectives, we had that forum. And also in the 2024 Barcelona ISPOR, we had a short course. I believe it was conducted by Doug and Leanne Larson, who is our immediate past chair, on real-world evidence in external control arms driving innovations in drug development. So ECAs are another form of big innovation that are happening, or continuously being updated in the field of RWE. So we have touched upon all the different aspects of it, and we have been contributing to the whole field so far. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. The current key project, which is almost at the stage of being wrapped up, is the assessment of real-world data elements describing social determinants of health in outcomes research in the US. And this is perhaps the third time you may have heard about SDH in this presentation only. And from that, you can imagine like how important this topic is. And key project, as Maddie has explained, like, this is one of the major initiatives that happens from our RWE SIG, and this the key project that is already getting finalized and all was focused on SDOH. So the two aims that we had in this key project were to identify the key SDOH in real world studies in the US, and to identify and discuss the availability and gaps in the quality and implementation of SDOH elements in the real world data in the US. Now, there was, and kudos to the entire working group, that there were so many studies that they had to go through, like they moved from like a systematic review to a targeted lit review aspect, where 2,275 studies moved on to full text review. So you can imagine what big of an endeavor this has been. And now all the evidence is being synthesized, and then it will come out as a publication, I believe. And this will add to the knowledge of SDOH about how we can, identify this SDOH in the real world data and the availability and gaps and so on. So please be on the lookout for this. And next slide, please. Now, Maddie, can we go to the next slide before I come back here? Another one, please. Next slide. Yeah. So I think the reason why I skipped a couple of slides, and of course I will go back to them, is that as a group, we are continuously brainstorming and coming up with new ideas. And one of the key projects that we have been working towards which is most likely going to be the next key project for our RWE-SIG is focused on tokenization. Now, tokenization, you may have gotten some ideas throughout the talks and through other talks within this summit as well. Like, there is a lot of things that we have to keep in mind when we are tokenizing the data. But one of the key things that happens is that if we are tokenizing the clinical trial data, and we need to move forward after the RCT is over and connect those patients to the real world data to see how is the durability of response. Now, we have been working towards all the different aspects of tokenization, which includes patient privacy protection, how to tokenize it, informed consent forms, and so on. But one of the key things which has not really been explored, because many of the companies are still in nascent stage, but to think about the next piece, which is once you tokenize your clinical trial, how is it going to impact in terms of the analytical techniques? And the next key project is most likely going to be focusing on this. And this is going to be a living document, because the field is going to evolve in the next 5-10 years. And in the next 2-3 years, once we are able to publish what we find from here, the good practice recommendations, that is also going to be very fluid and going to be evolving over time. So I'm not going to go through all the aims, but it's basically to reach out to all the stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders who have conducted or is conducting the tokenization of the clinical trials, conduct a focus group to understand what are the analytical challenges, like broken randomization structures and so on, to come up with themes based on which we will convene an multidisciplinary expert panels to come up with recommendations of how to handle the different scenarios moving forward. And also another thing, you learned about the 12 different SIGs, that there are multiple different SIGs. In the spirit of collaboration, we are also exploring the possibility of collaborating with our statistics SIG. So there is quite a bit of development in this that is going to happen in the next few months, I would say. Hopefully it will get approved, and then we'll go from there as the previous SDOH key project gets wrapped up. So thank you for that slight diversion, but Mary, can we go back to, yes, thank you. And some of the other things that we keep on doing as part of our RWE-SIG is organize webinars. And this webinar, as I believe Clarissa or Maddie mentioned, that this is open to all, right? So this is something that will be recorded and also posted as a resource within the ISPOR website. And the upcoming webinar, which our chair-elect Doug is doing all the planning and everything, is about navigating the US federal landscape of the RWD availability. So just very briefly, with a lot of changes within the politics and everything that are happening, particularly in the US, there is a lot of real world data sources that are getting impacted or are not being available, which used to be like the go-to data sets for many of the research projects that we used to do. So that is very unfortunate, but how are we going to handle that? What is in future stored in the what is in store for the future? So we are going to talk about all those things, and you can see all this very seasoned panelists that are going to talk about this issue. And we have the QR code as well as the link here. So please feel free to join or listen in later. This will be a great session in my view. Thank you. And one of the other things that I wanted to mention as part of the upcoming Glasgow European ISPOR conference in November, we are going to work on, we are going to have a RWE SIG sponsored forum focusing on harmonizing and enabling cross-border real-world evidence studies in Europe. And if you can think about this, like in Europe, there is a lot of differences in different countries and how they can share the data, what kind of evidence they can share. So to reduce that those issues, we are going to see what are the issues right now, how we can move forward with that, and we are going to have a session on that. And the QR code and the link is all available here. This session will be moderated by one of our very active member engagement co-chairs, Ashwin Kumar Rai, and we have very seasoned speakers who are going to talk about these issues from different angles. So if you are there, please join us for this particular session, and we look forward to it as well. So yeah, I think I have one more slide, I guess, please. Yeah. Now this RWE discussion thread, this is also another initiative that has been put forward by ISPOR, and I think this is one part because it's available to all the members of all communities. So it was launched on September 10th, I believe, last year, and the purpose is to share knowledge, insights, and experiences related to real-world evidence. So if you go in and you look into this particular thread, the posts are scheduled throughout the year with the responses logged by ISPOR members within the content corner. So for example, I can put and I have actually put in some comments about tokenization, and many people have provided their feedback, which was very valuable. And also it's a very good exchange of thinking and new learnings and so on. So, if you are able to join and provide your 2 cents, those are very highly welcomed from all of us. So this is also another avenue to get involved with ISPOR, RWE SIG, and other RWE community. So let's go to the next part. Yeah, I think that's it from us. I hope this session was very helpful. And last thing I would say that, the travel awards and all, as a student, I was a recipient of travel award from ISPOR, and I cannot emphasize more not just the it comes with a high prestige, and also it helps so much as a student or as new professional or as people from LMICs and all, to come to these conferences, network, learn more and all. So please make sure that you are familiar with all these resources that are being offered and make the best use of it. So thank you, and we are open to question and answers.
Wow, that was excellent. I think I can say on behalf of the entire audience, I have learned so much in this last 1 hour. I have probably like 10 questions that I want to ask. But in interest of time, we'll take some of the questions from the audience. There have been a lot of interesting questions popping up in the comments. One of the questions from Jyoti is, what is the role you see for students and early career professionals in shaping next generation of RWE research practices?
I can take a stab at it, and other panelists, please feel free to join in and chime in as you see fit. So I feel like students and early career professionals, they bring in a lot of fresh ideas, new ideas. So they have a great deal to help move forward the needle for RWE. And they need to they should get involved as much as they can, their time permitting and everything, to help with this kind of initiatives. I don't think we see too many student members in the RWE SIG per se, but I think it's open to everyone. So they can come in, they can participate, they can learn and everything, and provide ideas. What's new, because sometimes some ideas may be too far ahead of its time, but it's something good to come out and talk about, be bold and learn from the whole thing. And as you get involved with these things, you make yourself known in the field. So that's also another perk that comes with participation, and definitely with those new fresh ideas, new technologies, new methodologies, we can shape the next research practices in RWE.
I'd like to add one other thought. I think Sandipan had a terrific summary there. And in the US, as just one example, the delivery of healthcare and also the development of new therapies and medical devices is a dynamic, or both are dynamic spaces right now. There's a lot of changes that are occurring, particularly in the use of evidence to deliver care and the evidence to just develop and sell a new therapy. And AI and other new technologies are also being introduced, which are creating some new applications, new use cases, but also new requirements for data. So I think that the students and the early career professionals, they're growing up with these changes, whereas those who have been in the industry for 20 plus years, like myself, we're not growing up with them, and we may have more of a kind of a legacy perspective on what evidence generation and evidence use is for particular healthcare. So I think that perspective of the users who are growing up kind of native to using evidence-based methodologies and pathways, as well as new technologies like AI, that perspective is incredibly important to have as part of the conversation, and which makes students and early career professionals a highly valued voice in the room, and to have as part of ISPOR and part of the activities that we're putting on. So I think that there are many, many opportunities, and there's a lot of value to having early stage professionals part of the conversation.
That makes sense. Let's take one more question. This question from Viraj, which says that ISPOR is uniquely positioned as a global multi-stakeholder society. How does ISPOR ensure that perspectives from low and middle income countries are included in RWE discussions?
I can start, and then others can chime in. I think we do have an LMIC initiative specifically as part of one of our strategic initiatives, and looking at the different chapters across the globe. We do an annual report of all of the activities that are happening in the chapters, to ensure that we are a global organization and are moving forward the needle on a lot of the activities that are happening across the chapters themselves. I think for LMICs, it's important for capacity building and training, which we have expanded to recently, working with our education department and the Gates Foundation and promoting different educational channels for the different regions of the world. So this is something new and coming up and coming for our education program. I think partnerships and collaboration often are an area that we see, especially with our roundtables. We try to make those as global and bringing in different HTA bodies and agencies that often aren't included at the conversation. I think including patients in the conversation as well is where you'll get those areas that you may not be thinking about for making different decisions at the healthcare stage. I think also looking at the funding and infrastructure of these groups in these countries is a big gap and challenge. It is a challenge for a lot of different areas, but dedicating the resources to these areas, because they are important for representation in the decision making that we do for all of our working groups, committees, conferences. We're always looking for the global representation in our special interest groups, and in those leadership positions that Maddie had presented earlier. I think also looking at the equity, inclusivity for the students, as we were previously talking about. These are people that are up and coming in the field, and they are more attuned to the dynamics of the world, and they're the ones looking at the real world populations and underrepresented voices and including them in the conversation.
That's a really great point, Clarissa. And just to add some maybe finer special interest group really tucks into that population is the offerings that we have for our members are not limited to conferences. We make a real conscious effort to have activities like the real world evidence discussion thread, webinars, educational offerings that we can make available to all our members. So it's not that you have to attend our conferences to get involved with the group and provide your own unique thoughts, ideas, and contributions to the work that's ongoing.
Thank you, Mary and Clarissa, for answering this question. We'll take one last audience question, and this is something which came up during the presentation on multiple occasions: social determinants of health being integrated into RWE studies. It's a fairly deep topic in itself, on which we could probably have a 1-hour session. But at a high level, what are some of the main challenges that you are seeing around data quality and access?
That's a really good question. I'd be happy to start with that. One of the biggest challenges is just the burden on the providers to collect this type of information that we're seeing. It's consistently collected. Social determinants of health are usually data points that fall onto the patient to provide, whether that's at an annual visit with their physician, with their provider, or as data that comes census, for example. So as we've been doing that literature review as part of our key project, a lot of methodologies are collecting data from surveys, whatever kind of information they can pull from local hospital systems or public healthcare systems that are often incomplete, because it is not the expectation that every single visit is collecting this information from patients. Patients are not required to always provide this information. If it is voluntary for them to fill out a questionnaire, for example, that is asking about their experience with food insecurity, housing, any economic burdens, job finding, job opportunities, there's a lot of missingness in that data. So it's a matter of taking what can be found to try and integrate it into making real world evidence that is reflective of those types of data.
One thing I would add is the understanding of the significance of the data is also varied depending on the data type. So SDOH in the grand scheme of things is a relative new kid on the block. And so there's a lot of fundamental questions that need to be answered to understand the significance of the data. So there's an old joke in the data industry, for those who are in the data industry, I've heard it kind of a gazillion times, but there are so many great data standards in healthcare that it's hard to choose just one. And so obviously the joke is that there is no standard if you have all these different standards in healthcare data. And I think similarly, building consensus and agreeing or creating consensus scientifically on the significance of the data remains a challenge similar to standardizing healthcare data, given that there's so many different perspectives that are out there. And so that is something that academics are doing terrific work and have made substantial work. ISPOR is also part of that conversation and chipping into moving that forwards. But I would say that remains another challenge for the category.
Yeah, and if I can add a very quick different viewpoint from an industry perspective, like again, my viewpoint, but if you see and all the things that Maddie and Doug talked about are all, of course, very relevant. But one of the things that I feel is that many times from an industry perspective, when the strategy is being set for supporting a product or a certain program or anything like that, this SDOH does not always come up to the top priority, right? That's an unfortunate truth, at least as of now, right? There can be other groups within industry like policy research and all who can really dig deeper into these aspects. But if you're doing treatment patterns and all, and if you have to worry about the SDOH, it's not really at the top priority. But I hope that it will get to a point where this data has less missingness or more completeness as a corollary, so that we don't have to worry about those parts moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for answering this. We have many more questions, but in interest of time, I think we can conclude this discussion, and I'm hoping that we'll get to continue this discussion forward on subsequent forums This has been super informative. Thank you so much, Clarissa, Maddie, Doug, and Sandipan for taking the time and sharing your insights with our audience.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
you so much.
Thank you for having us. Have a
Have a
good
great
rest of
day.
the Bye.
Great day.
Bye.
Bye.